You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome back to the Friday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast. And right now, we are happy to welcome back our bi-weekly host of our Women's Hockey Spotlight, Erica Ayala. And Erica, busy time in women's hockey right now, even though it is the off season.
Well, that's when all the business happens, Gil, So yes, we're in free agency in the Premier Hockey Federation and still waiting for official word from the PWHPA as far as what the fall will look like for them. But we have lots of player movement. We are still awaiting some head coaches for two of the teams in the PHF. So yes, lots of news, lots of rumors. It's all happening.
Yeah, I want to talk first off of what I think, in my opinion, is the biggest news. Noora Raty signing with the Metropolitan Riveters. Of course, this legendary Finnish goaltender, been in World Championships, Olympic Games, and had previously been with the PWHPA, but has signed with the Metropolitan Riveters. What's your take on this?
Well, I have a few things. One is it's huge, as you said. It has been, such a great goaltender in women's hockey, whether you're talking about in the WCHA, in college, playing for Team Finland, as you mentioned, Rachel, playing in the CWHL, and then being one of the ambassadors when the Chinese national team brought two teams that then went down to one team to the CWHL. And then also she's coming out of retirement and had a really gnarly, and I believe we talked about this on Locked On NHL, but had a really bad contract divorce is the term we hear these days with Team Finland, which was rumored to be due to some discrepancies with the coaching staff. So Noora Raty, huge. And also she gave an interview with, I believe, what was a Finnish outlet, saying that she, as you mentioned, Rachel, involved with the PWHPA, was on the board, saw what the proposal was there, and opted to get a bag, as they say, knowing that her career is, coming to a close.
And how much at this point in her career can she help New York?
Well, that's the question. And it's not just Noora Raty. It's also Kacey Bellamy has signed a big contract, $120K plus a $7K signing bonus, which on my women's hockey podcast as part of the Black Rosie Media Founding Four podcast, we talked about this, that a $7K signing bonus used to be a competitive salary in this league. So that's just how much influx is coming in. But to your point, Gil, it's a little bit of a balancing act right now in women's hockey in this wild west of free agency. Those are big names, big draws. And what have you done for me lately? Janet Jackson just had a birthday a few days ago. So throwing that out there. What have you done for me lately? We don't know when it comes to Noora Raty and when it comes to Kacey Bellamy. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see.
So I think the other big team for me that's made a splash this offseason so far is Montreal. And so I'm curious what you think about the new signings they've had and the returning vets and so many names. They are well into their free agency process right now.
Certainly are. And I think the big signing there is the poaching of the Boston Pride, which is also kind of a sub-story just of the Boston Pride overall. But yes, they get goaltender of the year and rookie of the year, Corinne Schroeder. She only played 1 year in Boston and is now going to Montreal. She talked about how being, closer to home and her family not having to fly on multiple flights to come and watch her was a huge thing. And then you also have Teresa Schwabstahl, who played at the University of Vermont. She bested Amanda Pelkey for the scoring title, or the scoring record, I should say, at the University of Vermont. Also plays for Team Austria. So yes, they're doing some big things, and that's with the re-signing also of Jade Downey-Landry, who was a great center for them last year, and Sophie Betty is in that conversation of players that what can they do on the ice. And Betty was really good last year, but also is a massive name. So, I mean, I think that there's a lot going on there. And then also Elizabeth Giguère, who has played with Hockey Canada in the rivalry series, also from Boston, goes to Montreal.
And yet Boston, in addition to losing players, they've been adding players as well.
Yes, and this is another big name coming out of the NCAA, Alina Muller. She at 20 something is a 3-time Olympian. I mean, that's a huge pickup. The next few years of players coming out of the NCAA are really going to give us an understanding of how we look at the landscape of women's pro hockey, because these are Olympians. These are multiple time over NCAA champions. We're seeing with the transfer portal, a lot of players winning one place and then trying to go win a championship with the Ohio State seems to be a pretty big draw. I'm thinking of Kayla Barnes, who of course is an Olympian, couldn't quite get it done with Boston College and is now headed to the Ohio State University. So I think it's a really, like I said, I kind of been using this terminology, wild, wild west of times, but this is all good. I really do think that it's good. I know some people have allegiances or one operation that they prefer over the other. But I think what you're going to see is some really good hockey, and the $1.5 million salary cap is enticing players. But it also means some of your middle of the pack athletes are having to find ways and make a case for them being grinders on other teams.
So the champion Toronto Six, what are their chances, do you think, given how free agency is going so far for them?
That's a really great question, Rachel, and it's something that we broached on Twitter Spaces again with the Founding Four podcast. But you have to remember, we talked about this before, the Toronto Six signed Daryl Watts mid-season and to a 2-year deal, and her second year, she's going to make $150K, which is reported to be, that's US dollars, it's $200K Canadian. She is the highest paid player as of right now. We see Kennedy Marchment renegotiated her deal with the Connecticut Whale, much deserved, and she tapped out at $130K. So still Daryl Watts is set to make the most money next season. So what does that, though, as far as that portion of the salary cap, how does that impact what the Toronto Six can do? Because they signed that deal before they were officially champions and then having to re-sign some players to defend their title. But we do see that they brought back the captain, Cheyenne Darkangelo, who was the lone U.S. skater on that Toronto Six team to hoist the cup. And they also brought back Elaine Chuli. And I think those are really solid signings. So now we have to just wait and see what they're going to do. We have Angelica Rodriguez, who contributes to the Ice Garden and Black Rosie Media, saying that they do expect to have Carly Jackson back. She backstopped Elaine Chuli. So it's really a little bit of a wait and see. But again, how does the timing of even what the PWHPA is doing, or just the timeliness of some of these other signings, how does that impact what Toronto and other teams can do? We haven't even talked about the Buffalo Beauts, who don't have a head coach yet. We haven't talked about the Minnesota Whitecaps, who have been making signings and have re-signed some players, but don't have a coach yet. And how does that impact where free agents want to go?
Yeah, it's a wide open, as you say, wild, wild west kind of a thing. Are you big picture concerned about competitive balance? You know, you have the salary cap to sort of check that, but how concerned are you about not having too many haves and have-nots?
That's an interesting question within the context of women's hockey, because we've seen the ebbs and flows of that already. And so I think
Boston.
honestly, there you go. But, or I should say, and Boston in the CWHL, the Boston Blades, and then when everyone jumped ship from that one season, the Blades won in 20, I guess it would have been 13-14, and then 14-15, and then in 2015, either way, once the NWHL, numbers are hard. Once the NWHL came around, we saw the national team players come to the league where they got paid, won that inaugural championship. But then it was the Buffalo Beauts with a goaltender on the cusp of retirement, actually announced her retirement right before the final, in Brianne McLaughlin, now Biddle, Brianne McLaughlin Biddle, but was able to stun Boston, and they didn't get their repeat championship until years later. So it's a little bit of a toss-up. I think that overall, you are going to see big names that might want to cluster together and build super teams, a la what we see in the NBA, and even now the WNBA is doing that. But I do think that women's hockey is structured a little bit differently, especially at the collegiate level and even the international level, where you have, again, Olympians. Not the United States and Canada do not hold a premium on Olympians. There are Olympians that play elsewhere and that are really good. You've got Emma Soderberg. We've been talking about
my fave.
Exactly.
Love her.
I got to pander to the co-host here. But I mean, so again, it's an interesting question. I just don't know that we have the answer yet, Gil.
Fair enough. Well, Erica, thank you so much for stopping by. Erica does our Women's Hockey Spotlight every other week here on the Friday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast. Looking forward to the next one, Erica.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. And like you said, look forward to the next one. Who knows what the big splash will be then?